It is mid-January now, and I wanted to talk about some of my 2026 reading goals because I'm doing things a little bit differently this year, and I'm actually really excited about the changes that I want to make in my reading habits, in my reading journey. And I thought I would share some of them because I think it would be helpful for anyone that is feeling a little bit burnt out in their reading journey. We are in the same boat. So I'm going to talk about some of my reading goals, and I would love to hear what your reading goals for this year are. I know that I've seen a lot of people moving away from number-based reading goals. They're setting goals that are a little bit more tangible, a little bit more putting routine habits into their reading rather than just checking off a box of how many books they've read. Now, I am someone who really enjoys the aspect of tracking my reads and seeing that reading goal countdown as I go through the year. I really enjoy that aspect of it, but at the same time, the last couple of years have set my reading goal super high, thinking it would motivate me to read more. When in reality, it kind of just stressed me out when I was at times reading to reach a number. And I want to refocus my reading habits this year in a way that brings back the joy of reading and the experience of reading that I fell in love with and is the reason that I consider myself an avid reader now. And part of that is setting aside the notion that I have to read X many books in a year to be considered an avid reader. It's time to make a change, and here are the steps that I plan to take to make that change this year. So the first major goal that I have for this year is that I want to start writing better reviews. Now, how I'm putting this into practice is going to take a while to really get into the swing of things, to understand the way my mind works when it comes to reviewing a book. A lot of the time when I review a book, it's simply based on vibes. And while I think that can be appropriate for certain types of books, I am also an ARC reader, and I'm someone who wants to read more nonfiction and classics. And I don't want my reviews to simply be based on vibes for those types of books. While I'm not completely overhauling the way I write reviews, I am doing a reconstruction in the way I write reviews, specifically reviews for ARCs. How I'm putting this into practice is one, writing more reviews. I'm going to start trying to write a review for every book that I finish, which is a pretty big task. In the past, that has not been a practice that I have made commonplace. And to help me put this into practice, I am going to be taking more detailed notes when I read my books. Now, again, I don't think every book merits writing loads of notes and a deep dive analysis. But for books like ARCs, books where I'm trying to develop my literary mind, I will try to take more detailed notes. I'm going to be using reading trackers and notebooks to really put my thoughts into words, using practices like annotating and tabbing to really help me hone that skill and be able to go back to the book that I'm reading and not only remember what I read about, but remember the way it made me feel and the thoughts that it made me think while I was in the process of reading it, which I really think will help me with writing better and more detailed reviews because I'll be able to understand my thought process throughout the book. All that being said, I don't think that I'm ever going to be the type of person that is writing true literary book report style or essay reviews. I just want to be a tiny bit more analytical, a tiny bit more thoughtful when it comes to reviews, to really understand what feelings were evoked within me when I read a book, and also to help me with giving better recommendations. A lot of times I feel like I'm not qualified to give a recommendation because I don't remember the smaller and finer details of a book. And maybe if I have a little bit more of a detailed review process, it will help me with being able to recommend books in a way that feels like they actually fit the person I'm recommending them to. My second big goal for 2026 when it comes to reading is to read for enjoyment. Now, this seems a little bit obvious because obviously I'm reading for enjoyment, but I do put pressure on myself to read what's trending, to read smart books or classics or things that I think will make me look educated and well-versed and well-read. And while I do think it is important to read books occasionally that lend some literary and educational value to your life, I also want to treat reading as the hobby that it is. It's something that enriches my life, and not just in a intellectual way, in an emotional way. And I want to just lean into that a little bit more this year. How I'm putting that into practice is I'm not going to pick up books that I don't want to read. And if I am reading a book and not enjoying it, I'm allowing myself to DNF it without a second thought. And I'm no longer going to keep a for later tag on Goodreads or Storygraph or any of my tracking. In the past, when I've done this, I have felt pressure to go back and finish a book that I DNF'd or left for later. I'm just going to straight DNF them now. Leaving a book that I did not finish on a list where I'm expecting myself to go back to and finish just kind of stresses me out. So I'm not going to do that anymore. It seems pretty simple, but I actually think this will probably be the hardest one to execute. Goal number 3 for 2026 is I want to diversify my reading. This is going to come into play in a couple of different ways. I'll just list them out. I want to read more classics. I am going to try to pick up one classic per month. However, I don't know if I'll be able to finish one classic per month, so I will simply start a classic and continue reading that throughout the month until I finish it. And then once I finish it, I will pick up another one. I am going to be starting this month with Frankenstein, which I've never read before. I'm very excited and also quite nervous about it because some of that old-timey language really gets to me. I plan to read more Canadian authors this year. I am a very proud Canadian, and there is such a rich literary history in Canada that I want to incorporate that a little bit more into my life. I plan to read more nonfiction this year than I have in the past couple of years. I do tend to gravitate towards memoirs, especially celebrity memoirs when it comes to nonfiction, but I want to try and sprinkle in other types of nonfiction, more educational or historic nonfiction that can, educate me a little bit and build that intellectual muscle, and I can learn something new. I'm not going to put too much pressure on myself about this goal specifically, but I do want to try to sprinkle in some more nonfiction in the coming year. I want to read more diversely when it comes to persons of color, especially in the BIPOC realm. I want to incorporate more of that into my reading. I already feel that I read pretty diversely, and an author's ethnicity or race or sexuality, and even the characters in the book, really doesn't come into play when I'm choosing my books. But I do want to branch out a little further, because I think that reading about characters who are different from you is so enriching. It builds empathy and it gives you a greater understanding of the world around you. This is part of the reason that I think reading fiction is so important, because it builds empathy, because it builds understanding. And the best way to do that is to diversify my reading portfolio when it comes to reading about characters who look different than me, who have different life experiences than me. So this is one that every year, this is part of my goal, to be a little bit more diverse when it comes to my reading. And this is probably the most important part of diversifying my reading. And lastly, I want to expand my genre knowledge. I tend to stick to a very specific type of genres. I read romance, I read thrillers. I've dabbled a little bit into horror and speculative fiction, and very briefly touched into fantasy, but that's pretty much it. And I want to branch out more. I want to get into some weird stuff. I want to read more science fiction. I want to read more fantasy and just expand my knowledge. Again, I want to be more diverse in my reading, and that includes the genres that I'm reading. My fourth goal for this year is less bookish consumption. Now, I am not the type of person who goes on massive book spending sprees. I actually rarely buy a book brand new and at full price. However, I am a big fan of thrifting, and I find it hard to walk out of a thrift store without a book in hand. Sometimes when I do that, I find I'm picking up books that I'm not actually going to read, and I'm just kind of buying books to buy them. Now, collecting books is a totally different hobby than reading books. I truly believe in that, and I do think there is value in having a physical library in the home, especially in today's day and age of everything going so digital and us being so reliant on digital media, which could go away at any point. I think that having a physical library is actually going to be a very valuable asset one day in the future. I do plan on continuing growing my physical library. I just want to be a little bit more intentional about it by picking up books that A, either I've already read and love and know I want to reread, or B, only picking out books that I actually feel like I'm going to read, and being realistic with myself when I say I actually want to read a book, because I want to read every book under the sun, but that's not possible. So I think I just need to be a bit intentional. And part of this goal is reading down my physical TBR. So reading books that I already own, that I have, that I can hold in my hand. So I'm really trying to prioritize reading my physical TBR and focusing more on building a library that is meaningful to me and not just buying books to have them. And my final goal for my bookish journey in 2026 is the reason that I'm making this video, and that is I want to build a community. I want to find my village. I want to connect with other people. Reading is such a solitary hobby. It's very much selfish and it's about self-discovery and understanding. However, when you're creating around bookish content and even cozy content, it can feel isolating not to have anyone to talk to about it. I don't really have anyone in my actual life who considers themselves a reader. And so connecting with you is why I'm doing this. It's why I'm making these videos. I want to find like-minded people who can fellowship with me and help me understand myself better, who I can give value to and receive value in return. And what better way to do it than to connect with you through these videos. I'm going to practice this by diving deep into the bookish community here on YouTube. Along with diving into the community, I am hoping to try to join some book clubs this year, as well as maybe trying to do some buddy reads with some of the friends that I make on this platform to sort of foster a sense of community and help me not feel so alone, because sometimes it feels like talking into the void, and I just want to be a hand that reaches out to anyone else that might be feeling the same way. Those are my goals for this year when it comes to reading and consuming and sharing. I want to focus on the quality of my reading experience and the emotional value that it's bringing to my life. So if this video resonated with you, please subscribe and we can grow together. We can build community. We can read for enjoyment and for self-development and growth, and we can read with intention, which is what this is all about. That is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please, again, subscribe, like this video, maybe check out some of my other videos, and we can do this together.